make a pawpaw bread that's similar to banana bread. Or pawpaw ice cream is easy to make. It's about let me think how we do it. One whole milk, whatever milk you got, and 1 cup of heavy cream. And
Oh my gosh, that was an aggressive one.
be as they were a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know where it's a colder temp.
I will welcome us all, Tony. Okay. Now, are you getting me? Yep. Talking. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Pawpaw workshop today. NOFA, New Jersey is really pleased to have Mr. Charlie West as our expert and host to guide us today and give us some education. So thank you very much for coming, and I really want to encourage you to keep NOFANewJersey.org in your favorites bar so you can check us out. There's regular events happening. Also, there's a little button you can click to donate, which we really appreciate. That money goes to, supporting educational purposes and putting on events, paying our staff. So thank you for coming, and I will turn it over to the man of the hour.
Thanks, Mike. I will say the staff is very minimal, so don't think your money is going to pay big salaries. Again, let me emphasize, join NOFA, donate to NOFA, and we have coming up, I should mention, in January, late January, is our winter conference. It's a 2-day conference. It's virtual this year, and with some really excellent speakers that will be presenting. I will be presenting also, so I won't include myself with that as being one of the excellents, but we do have some really outstanding speakers coming.
Charlie, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
Tony asked me to, if anybody is uncomfortable being videotaped, please let us know, whether it's throwing a stone at me or something, and just I'll let them know. But I assume not hearing from you, everybody is okay with being videotaped. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Well, let me do a little salesmanship first. We mentioned NOFA. I do have 2 books. They're not written by me, but they're friends of mine, and they're both on pawpaws. They're excellent books, so if you need some information or like some information, see me, or actually you can see Mike. Either one of us will have. I've got more copies in the garage. We also have, or we'll have, once we're finished, we'll have fruit for sale if you want. And I do have quite a bit of fruit. This has been a very good year for fruit. Things were ideal. We had good pollination early in the year, and we had plenty of water. And that's what pawpaws like, is a lot of water. They don't like standing water, but they like good rainfall and intermittent watering when needed. I also have a few grafted trees available for purchase. If anybody's interested, see me. They're $75 each. And we're also taking orders for next year, if you want to order for next year. And trees next year will be available for pickup beginning about the middle of June. Good question. You need 2 minimum. Otherwise, if you plant 1, you'll have a real nice ornamental, but you're not going to get probably any fruit. Although there are a couple varieties or cultivars that are thought to be at least partially self-fertile, but mostly they're all dependent upon cross-pollination, and they have to be different, not just 2 different trees, but 2 different cultivars. Here again, if you have 1 cultivar or 2 of 1 cultivar, you essentially just have 1 set of genetics, and so you've got to have 2 different ones. Okay, well, let me give you a little bit of my kind of information here. Eventually we're going to work our way back and look at trees and look at certain aspects of the trees and look at some of the fruit, and then we will end up doing the tasting, which is how this was advertised. as a tasting, and we'll also have some other desserts along with it, made from pawpaws. Yes, there is. If somebody's having, and there are buggy here, there's some bug spray up here if you choose to use it. All right. I'm oftentimes asked, why pawpaws? How did I get involved in pawpaws? Well, and how did we end up with pawpaws here? And I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting. Circumstances happened, kind of by accident. I went with my son, my younger son, and his girlfriend down to North Carolina to a bluegrass festival about 15 years ago. And on the way back, he said, you know, there's an interesting nursery in Virginia. We should stop. So we did, and we ended up buying a couple pawpaws trees there, amongst other things. And so we brought them back. That happens to be Edible Landscaping, which is a highly recommended nursery if you're looking for a variety of different fruit trees and and ornamentals. They're in Virginia. Of course, my son told me this is right off the highway, but it really was like an hour each way off the highway. But I guess it's all just a matter of what you call just off the highway. Okay, so what is a pawpaw? Pawpaw is an extremely unusual plant, considering botanically the family of plants it belongs to. The genus and species is Asimina triloba, Latin words, and more correctly it's referred to as a North American pawpaw, as opposed to just pawpaw, that we all just call them pawpaws. The reason for that is that in the tropics and in various other parts of the country, there are other fruits that are sometimes locally referred to as pawpaws. And so we've, as a organization and a group of people, we've tried to expand the name to call it North American pawpaw. In the family that the pawpaws belong to, the North American pawpaws belong to, there's approximately 2,500 species. 2,499 of them are tropical. This is the only one that you find in temperate zone. Only one. The others, 2,499 are all, as are approximations of course, are all tropical. Some of these you may be familiar with, such things as sour sop, chirimoya, sweet sop, sugar apple, and a few others that you'll find if you go into the tropics or even just in the southern part of the U.S. At the right time of year, you may find these in the markets. But they're all related to pawpaw, North American pawpaw. They're all different genus. They're not the genus Asimina, but most of them are in the genus Annona. Here again, Latin words that you don't need to be too concerned with. As far as the history of the wild pawpaws, or pawpaws, North American pawpaws, there's been a number of varieties that have developed. Somebody asked me a while ago, how many varieties do I have, or cultivars that we have here? Well, I've got about 30, 35, 40, I don't know exactly how many different ones growing here. In actuality, there's been identified somewhere well over 100. In fact, in this book, there's a whole chapter devoted to kind of the history of the naming of cultivars and the names that are there. Many of them are things that have showed up in literature or writings and kind of disappeared. But a lot of them are still available. The development of pawpaw cultivars really started in the early 1900s. In 1916, I believe it was, a Journal of Heredity put out an advertisement for people to send them their biggest, best pawpaw. And they got a lot of response from that, and there was a reward. I think at that time it was $100 reward. $100, 100 and some years ago, was a fair amount of money. The winner of the contest happened to be from southeastern Ohio, and so that tree, those seeds were taken amongst some of the other seeds, and were used by various breeders in the early to mid 1900s. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who were doing it were gardeners, kind of like me or you or whatever, and you grew a few crosses and maybe didn't keep good track of what you were doing, and things kind of got lost. And in fact, probably the biggest person doing it at that time, I think, was in around 1940. He suddenly died, didn't leave hardly any records, and that kind of ended the research that he had done. So that kind of brings us up very quickly to the late 1900s, when Neil Peterson. How many of you ever heard of Neil Peterson? A few, good. You should all hear about Neil Peterson. You will today. Neil Peterson started a breeding program after he got out of graduate school. He supposedly kind of stumbled onto pawpaws like some of us have in the woods. He was living in West Virginia, where he still lives, and found them in the woods and wondered about them and this and that. And he ultimately started a breeding program, which went on for approximately 20 years. As it takes several, he had 7 or 8, 9 years for a generation to get seed and do crosses and do selection. So he did that, and ultimately what he came up with was a release, patented, and release of ultimately 7 different cultivars. And some of them you've heard of. Probably the 2 most famous ones are Shenandoah and Susquehanna. But the other 7 are also well known. I think we will sample at least one of those, 1 or 2 of his today. A little more history takes us in the late 1900s to Kentucky State University. That's not the University of Kentucky, it's Kentucky State, which is a smaller university with a good ag school. And through hook or by crook, or however they got the grant, they ended up with a grant to do pawpaw research, and they have since become the only full-time pawpaw research institution in this country, and I think maybe in the world. That's in Kentucky State, which is in Franklin, and they have since released 3 cultivars from their research. They have a couple more they're going to release, I think, this year. I have all of theirs growing here. I made good connections with them about 10 years ago, and they gave me a number of the cultivars that they were researching, so I've been kind of researching them here a little bit myself. And what I found out so far is that basically the ones they've released are probably the best, which I guess makes sense. But there is another 1 or 2 which I hope they release that produces really large fruit. I should have brought out some fruit, some big, because I got some very, very nice sized fruit here to show you. But anyway, that's kind of the history. Let me give you just one other thing I want to mention, 2 other things I want to mention as far as history. Ron Powell in Ohio started in year 2000 the Ohio Pawpaw Growers Association. You say, why Ohio and why pawpaw? Well, Ohio is kind of almost the center, at least what I consider the center of the wild pawpaw population. In fact, the pawpaw that won the contest back in the early 1900s was from southeastern Ohio. But anyway, Ron Paul, or Powell, not Paul, Powell, don't get me mixed up with Ron Powell. Ron Paul. This is Ron Powell. He founded as I said, the OPGA, which is the Ohio Pawpaw Growers Association, and that has since morphed into the North American Pawpaw Growers Association. You can find that information on the internet. If you like, you can join the organization. I think he gets a big $20 a year for membership. He puts out a newsletter 4 times a year, plus an internet newsletter also. So you get like about, I think, 6 or 8 communications a year from him. And he's been doing this for 20 years, and he still enjoys it and still does it. And he's made a lot of progress with pawpaws. He has a farm in southern Ohio where he has, I think, something like 1,000 trees on it. And he sells the fruit. I think he sells this primarily to brewers out in the Midwest. They brew pawpaw beer, all the microbrewers out there. I've been in touch with 2 or 3 microbrewers here in New Jersey. They never heard of pawpaws, and I can't get them interested in doing pawpaw beer, but I will eventually get that job done. Okay, what else? Oh, one last thing. The Ohio Pawpaw Festival. Back to Ohio. It's a 3-day festival. If you ever get a chance, it's in southeastern Ohio. Go. It's a lot of fun, a lot of music, a lot of beer, a lot of talk about pawpaws, and various displays and so on. But it's and you can camp right on site. It's near a lake. It's a really nice time. And that was last weekend. So you miss it. Last weekend. It's always the middle of September, and that's why I didn't start my events last week, was because it would overlap with that. And also Michael Judd has a pawpaw festival on that same weekend, so I kind of wait till the end for ours here. Next year I'll probably change that. Okay. Now, let me just give you a little bit of basic information about pawpaws, how to grow them, what they like, what they don't like, and then we'll start looking at some trees. Okay, as far as the trees are concerned, they'll grow in most any soil. pH from anywhere from 6 to 5.5 to 7. 6 and 6.5 is ideal for the pH. We plant, as you will see a little later, fairly close together. 8 to 10 feet is recommended. Some books will say 12. I think that's a little bit too far. In the commercial orchards, I think they plant about 10 feet apart, and they do prune so that and keep the trees shorter than mine, so they can hand pick for commercial purposes. As we see, our trees have gotten kind of big, and I haven't pruned them. I do need to do some pruning this winter and get some of the lower branches off because they're clear down on the ground. Now, as far as sunlight, pawpaws will grow in full sun, partial shade, and even in full shade. But you get a different kind of tree. In full shade, you'll get a tall, skinny, narrow tree that'll barely have just a few branches here or there, and it may be 30 feet tall out in the woods someplace. In partial shade, they're a little more compact, but not nearly as compact as the ones I have here. These here are growing in about 90% full sun, and that seems to be ideal, or full sun. My rule of thumb is the more sun, the more, it's not my rule, it's a fact, the more sun, the more fruit you'll get. You'll have more compact trees, bigger leaves, and they'll just produce more fruit. I have a small orchard on the other side of the house. It's most of those, not most, all of them are in partial shade. And if you're interested, we can later go out and look, and I can show you. Here's trees that are much more sparse in terms of branches. The leaves are a little smaller, and the amount of fruit I got off of those this year is probably only a fourth of what I've got off of these bigger trees here. So that's the deal on sun, which is kind of unusual because in nature, the natural environment for the pawpaw is in partial shade. They'll grow along the edges of woods, grow along the edges of fields. We still have, I didn't mention, I came originally from Ohio, and that's where I first was introduced to pawpaws. Actually 75 years ago I was introduced to pawpaws when my mother drugged me out in the woods with her and to pick up pawpaws. And we still have that family farm there. My sister lives there, and there's several pawpaw patches there. And my brother lives fairly close to there, and we were this summer looking at them, and I was trying to tell him, look, bring your chainsaw, cut down some of the trash trees here, and I'll send you scion wood, and you can graft these wild ones, and in a couple years you'll have a nice group of really good producing pawpaws. The soil there is much better than I have. I've got clay and shale. There in Ohio where we are, this is sandy bottom loam, and these pawpaw trees are just fantastic in that environment. So anyway, that's where they normally grow, but they will do quite well here. They make excellent landscape trees. I mean, if you want just one or two of them, put them in your front yard. Excellent place for them. Why not? They do lose their leaves. They're deciduous. They lose their leaves. They'll start once we get a first taste of a frost. The leaves will change color very quickly. They change to kind of a yellowish brown color, and then they drop very quickly. So they don't stay on very long. But they make a nice landscape tree. The flowers that they produce, and of course that's what you want if you're looking for fruit. You got to have flowers. Flowers precede the fruit, obviously. The flowers come out in the spring before leaves come out. So, and I've had just this conversation with someone who had bought trees a few years ago and was here and said, oh, my trees never flowered. They haven't flowered yet. And I said, well, when did you start looking for them? Well, she wasn't sure. But I'm guarantee you, knowing the age of the trees, they did flower. But she really didn't look because the leaves hadn't started to come out on the trees yet. So you got to start looking for flowers, and I'll show you how to tell if your trees are going to flower next year, because we already know the buds are there, and I'll show them to you in a little while. But they start to open, or swell, I shouldn't say. The buds start to swell in March, late March, and that'll continue. And this year, flowers really started opening around the 20th of April, which is a little bit early, but then I think this has kind of been the trend here. This is, I guess, some of your global warming, real local global warming occurring here. 2 years ago, though, we had a situation where we had early flower develop, and then we got a freeze around the 20th of April, or 20th, 25th, I've forgotten the exact date. I had 2 nights that were down to 25 here. The flowers were out and open. I went out and looked. I said, I've lost the crop. We'll have no fruit this year. They were just a mess. But the interesting thing about pawpaws, and this is quite an adaptive feature, is that I looked a week later, and now I got new flowers coming out. So what happens is a stem will produce at each node being where a leaf is, in the axil of the leaf, there'll be a flower bud forming, and many of them will have. And if the early flowers, I've kind of determined this, I don't know where you'll find this in writing anywhere, but it's just my interpretation of it, is that if the early flowers come out and are successful, some of the later ones, I think, just abort and never develop. But we lost that first round of flowers in that freeze, and 2 weeks later I had flowers everywhere, and I got almost a full crop out of it. But they flowered clear up until June, and usually flowering is done by May 15th. So it was those late flowers came out, and what a great, if you think about that in terms of evolution, what a great adaptive feature this organism has. Lose my first flowers, I got more, and that's exactly what happened.
How big are the flowers?
Pardon? The flowers are no, they're nothing spectacular. They're maybe in the end about that big, however big that is, 2 inches in diameter. And when let me just say a little bit more about the flowers. The structure, in terms of the structure of the flower, it's a complete flower. These are botanical terms, although complete's not, but it's used botanically. They're complete and perfect. And what that means is a complete flower means it has all 4 flower parts. Everybody know what the 4 flower parts are? Sepals, you've heard of those. Petals, stamens, and pistils, okay? The stamens are the male component and the pistils is the female component, and the other 2 are ornamental, primarily designed to attract pollination vectors, bees and so forth. Okay, so that's a complete flower, and it's also perfect. Perfect flower means only it has male and female components. It doesn't care about, the term doesn't refer to anything else other than male and female component. So pawpaws, then you can tell your friends you've learned something, that they're perfect and complete. Okay, the flower itself, as it develops, okay, since it has both male and female components, you may say, well, why do I need 2 plants? Well, because they're genetically incompatible within the same set of genetics. So what happens is, as the flowers develop, the female part of the flower develops first. That's the pistil. And at that point, the flowers are smaller and greenish in color, maybe just starting to turn maroon. And if you look carefully, right in the center, you will find the stigma of the pistil, and that's what receives the pollen. And depending on temperature, 2 to 3, 4, 5 days later, that flower will continue to develop. It now becomes maroon in color. If you look inside, you'll see the female part is all kind of either withered or starting to swell, meaning if it's swelling, it means it's been pollinated, but if it's not, it just kind of withers. But the stamens around it will now be producing pollen. And the key is the pollen has to get from that site to the stigma of another tree. Okay, how does that occur? Bees do not do the job. They have nothing to do with pawpaws. You find flies, various species of flies, beetles, ants. I find ants crawling around on them, and other small insects. The flower is said, and I can never smell it, but then I guess my smeller doesn't work too well. But the flowers are said to have an odor that kind of has an odor of slightly like rotten meat, and that's what attracts the flies. I guess the flies can smell it, I can't. I actually had a lady call me once that she wanted to buy pawpaw trees, but she heard that they smell, and she didn't want anything in her backyard that smells. But I assured her that you won't smell them. She was concerned that the whole backyard would stink. But no, it's a very, very mild odor, if you can smell it at all. Alex, have you ever smelled it? No. No, we can't smell it, but apparently the insects do. Okay. One last thing. Diseases. Basically none. Great. These trees have never seen a spray. I don't spray anything. But my peach tree over here, the fruits rot on it every year. That tree's been there 10 years. I've never gotten one peach. Not one peach off of it. And it has hundreds of peaches on it. Not one. These pawpaws, and we'll look at them as we go out there. I'll show you what very minor damage from insects are. But they basically don't have any notable diseases, and that seems to be particularly true here in the East, where they haven't reached me yet. I know out in Kentucky State and in some of the other places more out in the Midwest, they have some disease. It's not a major thing. They get some an organism called Fastichia, which can affect the fruit surface a little bit and can affect the leaf, cause brown spots on the leaves. I find virtually none of that here. So it's a great plant. You plant them, they're happy. I fertilize them with horse manure. You can buy whatever manure or whatever fertilizer you want. And if you don't fertilize them with anything, they'll probably do pretty well. Main thing is you want to compost them, put compost around them, and mulch, and they're happy. Water them. They do like water. In fact, I was really surprised in this book. Blake Cothran has put an estimate in there in terms of the amount of water that a commercial orchard should use to get maximum production. I was shocked at the amount. But I can believe it because this year we have plenty of rain at the right time, and fruit was big here and plentiful compared to some other years. So, okay. Any questions before we take a walk? Yes. Good question. Deer don't like them. But they will nip, particularly in the spring, the terminal buds when they first start to open, just a little bit. And I always figure it's the young ones that are only a year old who have never tasted a pawpaw, and they come out and they get it, and I'm sure they spit it out because it just tastes lousy. But they will nip them a little bit. And another thing about deer, they're a curious animal. If you plant something out, put something new in their environment, they seem to want to sample it. And I learned that the hard way. I planted 40 trees in a field about 8 years ago here in the back. All one day, planted them. I said, fine, I'll put up the barriers around them tomorrow. Went back the next day, and there was at least a half a dozen of them that had the buds nipped on them. It didn't kill them, but it just sets them back a year. So deer are curious, and they will try something new in their environment. But they won't eat them. I mean, if you plant, I grow mulberries, and if you put mulberries out, they'll eat a mulberry right back to the main axis. They'll eat the leaves, the stems, and everything on a mulberry. Mulberry is a very nutritious, and apparently very, well, I know it's a very nutritious plant. There's been some studies done with mulberries just to get off track that they're maybe have more nutrition in them than something like clover or alfalfa as far as forage is concerned. That's some stuff. That rings true because the deer, I've had them get into mulberries and they'll just eat everything back to the main stem. But no, deer, and if you take one of the leaves off of one of these trees and crush it and smell it, you'll see why. At least one of the reasons why animals don't like them is because they produce a chemical that has an odor and it doesn't taste good, and it's been some research done on it to where it has anti-cancerous properties. In fact, there was some work at Purdue University was done a number of years ago, and the thought was, let's grow pawpaws, and not for the fruit, but for just the vegetation, for extracts to make this anti-cancerous chemical. The other thing is, I've never had any type of rodent eat around the base of one of these trees, which if you plant apples out or some other fruit trees, they'll eat around the bases of them, ring them, and sometimes kill them. I got some chestnut trees in the backfield that the rodents got into. They destroyed a few of them, but never had that on a pawpaw, and I've never put anything around the base to protect them. So the only other thing is, if you do plant them out though, where deer can get to them, put a fence around them. If you drove in the driveway, I've got trees out there with fences around them. I don't care if the deer nip the bud on one of them, but what I don't want is the buck coming in and raking them, because even a pretty good sized tree, a big buck would destroy one of these trees. So there you go. Yes?
Charlie, you mentioned your plants being grafted.
Yes.
Can you talk maybe the difference between a grafted plant that somebody would buy versus a seed propagated?
Yeah, I should have brought examples up here. Give me a minute. Well, to people are grafted cultivars, because the thing about a grafted cultivar is you know exactly what set of genetics you're getting. if you want, for example, Shenandoah, you buy a grafted Shenandoah. If you're buying seedlings, the closest you can get to a Shenandoah would be a seedling that's from a seed, from a fruit of Shenandoah. But you don't know who Daddy was. It could be any number of these other 40 different varieties we have growing here. So that seedling may produce good fruit, or it may not. It may produce fruit even better than Shenandoah. Most likely not. If you planted 1,000 of them, you might come up with a couple that'll have even better fruit. Of the 1,000, you might have maybe half of them that are decent, similar to Shenandoah, and the other half will probably be inferior. It's just a matter of the genetics. But if you buy the grafted, and here's the graft right here. You can look at this later. What you have around it is just a tape, grafting tape. I use what's called a whip and tongue technique for grafting, which means you're making two slices, once on the rootstock. See, I would use this as a rootstock. Cut this off about here, throw the top half away, and put the what's called the scion, S-C-I-O-N, onto this. And you do this by making angle cuts on each, putting them together, taping them, and put a little wax on them. And pawpaws happen to be very easy to do. The first batch that I did I started right at the end of April. The end of March. And in fact, this one here was grafted. Well, this one's even later, in April, mid-April. But of the first, I don't know, 150 or so I did, I had about better than 95% take on them. Seems like a little later in the year, if I do them a little later, my percentage goes down. I don't know whether it probably has to do with the fact that the scion wood's a little older, because I collect the scion wood in February or early March, and it's in the refrigerator. And a lot of times it's in and out of the refrigerator a couple times, and I'm sure that doesn't help it. Its viability, and also probably the quality of the rootstocks that I use later on are not as good as the early ones, because it's kind of like, you know, which ones you going to do first? You're going to do the best ones first, and that's it. But they're easy to do. Unlike some fruits are not so easy. Apples are easy. I do American persimmons, and I have a lot of trouble with them. And I think it's because I'm probably not doing them at the right time, maybe doing them a little too late in the year. But anyway, so these are grafted. This actually is one called Rebecca's Gold, which is a tree right behind us. We'll look at that. If you buy that, you know that's exactly what you're getting, not a mixture of. Of course, Neil Peterson, when he did all the experiments, what was he dealing with? He wasn't dealing with grafted trees. He was dealing with seedlings. He was planting hundreds and hundreds of seedlings, and then selecting the fruit from them and analyzing the fruit. And out of literally, I think he had well over 1,000 trees out. And he got those seeds. I really cut that short. I mentioned in the early or mid 1900s, where there was a certain amount of genetic work, he went back to some of these old farms where these people had died and tried to recapture some of the genetics that they had. And that's where he took some of his seeds to grow the initial plantings that he did. And then he cross-pollinated some for second generation, and he ended up, he said, oh, what a job, taking fruit from 1,000 trees and trying to analyze it, not only by weight, but what he was selecting for. I didn't mention, he's selecting for fruit size, but he's also selecting for the amount of seeds in it. The fewer the seeds, of course, the more flesh, and that's what you want. You want fruit that has fewer and smaller seeds. So he was analyzing for that, and he's also analyzing for taste, and also the durability of the fruit. So he was doing that, did that for several years, and he had friends helping him, and he said that was quite a lot of work. but he hopefully come up with some really good cultivars, and we'll look at some of them. We'll talk about them a little later. Any other questions? Yes.
So are all Shenandoah considered to be the same cultivar when it comes to?
One would hope so.
Okay, so you have to have others then in order to
Yes.
fertilize.
You buy a Shenandoah from me and buy one from the West Coast, from One Green World, for example. Hopefully you got exactly the same cultivar, and they will not cross-pollinate. Because if I'm selling something that's called Shenandoah, and they're selling Shenandoah, they're supposed to be the same. I'm sure there's mistakes made in nurseries, but there's not supposed to be. Any of them. They all flower at about the same time, and I got a couple varieties here that seem to flower just a little bit later. But here again, remember I said they'll flower over about a 3-week period of time. So any two will cross-pollinate. And one other thing I'll mention: seedlings. If you buy seedlings, any two seedlings. This could be. I could have another one here. Both, let's say, from a Shenandoah fruit. Both from the same Shenandoah fruit. 2 seeds out of it. Grow 2 plants. They'll cross-pollinate because they're genetically different a little bit. Just like if you have 2 children, unless they're identical twins, they're genetically different. And the same will be true with your seedlings. So any 2 seedlings will cross-pollinate regardless of their source. But as far as cultivars, you have to have 2 different ones. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
What's your favorite variety?
Oh, I don't know. That's a question I never answer. My favorite variety? Shenandoah is good. We'll talk a little bit about the cultivars. Shenandoah is good. It's a little bit mild. Some people say it's kind of flat and doesn't have a lot of really good pawpaw taste. I don't think that's exactly true, but it's a milder one. Wabash is an excellent cultivar. We're going to sample Wabash and we'll see how you guys like it. What else? Susquehanna. Neil Peterson says Susquehanna is his favorite. I don't know. I'm having trouble getting Susquehanna to grow here. It grows, but it grows slow. Shenandoah grows quickly. The Wabash grows pretty well, but it seemed to be took a year or 2 longer before it started producing fruit. Tallahatchie is the latest Peterson release, and it's an excellent fruit. I haven't had a whole lot of experience with it because it was just released a few years ago, and the trees I have are not really that big. I only got a few fruits off of them so far. Rappahannock is the one Peterson I would not buy. What did I miss? Potomac. Potomac is an excellent one. We're looking right behind it. It's the Peterson that has the biggest and largest fruit on it. You have some there well over a pound in size. Kentucky State varieties, I think Chappelle is the best of the 3. That's just my personal opinion. Nice big fruit. Benson from Kentucky State was developed primarily because they thought it would have a good commercial application. The fruits are almost round. They thought and they're have a pretty tough skin on them, so they think that this would be a possibly one that could commercially be transported better. But their first release, which is called Atwood, also produces nice large ones, and the reason they released it, one of the aspects of it is that the branches in it tend to be wider angle. So as you may know, if you have narrow angle branches in a tree, you're more likely to break. And Atwood has wider angles, although I haven't seen them being dramatically wider. But that was the main reason they released it. And those are the 3 that they have released. So, which is my favorite? I guess it's whichever one's ripe right now. And I also have several, and we'll try some of these others. I have several other what I call heirloom varieties here. There's one called Rebecca's Gold, which this happens to be a cultivar of it. A number of people like that. I've sold a number of those trees, and we have the fruit. We have one called Mango. Occasionally I get a phone call from someone saying, gee, I didn't know you could grow mangoes this far north. Well, they're pawpaws called Mango. And I have another one called Lynn's Favorite, and this, I guess, was a favorite of Lynn. It's a pretty good pawpaw. I wouldn't stack it up to be as good as some of the Petersons. Got another one that's called Sweet Alice, and it does have a fairly large sweet fruit on it. And I've got, there's a whole bunch of others. You don't need to know the names. But they're mostly all what I call heirloom varieties. These are varieties that were established back prior, or pre-Neil Peterson. There is one other developer of pawpaw varieties, and that was Jerry Lehman, who actually was primarily dealing with American persimmons, but then he got involved in pawpaws. He's in Terre Haute, Indiana, and he ended up with 40 acres of persimmon and pawpaw trees. And he is from his research, and he did a lot of crosses. He hand controlled crosses, and there's a few of his releases out that are really outstanding. One of them is Lehman's Delight, and it doesn't matter about the names, but he used to go to different festivals, and particularly the Ohio Pawpaw Festival. He kept winning the largest and the best pawpaws at that festival, at the contest, and these were his releases at the time. Unfortunately, he got killed in a farming accident here a couple years ago, so he's no longer with us. I knew him somewhat, and it's really sad that he got killed. Anyway, and I don't know what's happened to his farm. Last I heard, his wife is still there, and she's not doing anything with it. Anyway, any other questions? Why don't we take a walk out this way? Let's see if I can point out a few things. What's our time frame here? Anybody got a watch?
It's 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock? Okay.
Plenty of time.
Oh, I got years yet. Okay. This is a Shenandoah. This variety, this tree here. This tree's only been in the ground 5 years. And this is the 3rd year it's had fruit on it, which is kind of unusual for grafted trees. Usually it takes 3 or 4 years before they'll fruit. This one had fruit after the 2nd year in the ground. This year it had too many. I didn't thin it, which is something you kind of need to do if you get too much fruit set. That's why, this is propped up. Otherwise, it might break the branches. Now, this tree, I don't know whether there are about 20 or so fruit on it left on it. I've probably taken 30 off of it already. So it's been very productive. But the fruit are a little smaller than they normally would be on Shenandoah. They normally would be maybe another even 50% bigger. And I do have another tree, a little older tree down below, which doesn't have as many fruit on it, and they are larger there. Now, just by contrast, this tree behind you was the same, planted 5 years ago also, and they were the same size. This gives you some idea that I don't know why, but some just don't grow as fast as others. And I don't think it's a variety difference. Although that is Susquehanna, and I do have a few Susquehannas, and they haven't grown as well. So maybe it is.
Still in the sun.
Well, that's right now, but I don't think that's that's not the problem. I don't know what the problem is. That one this one flowered this year, but it didn't set fruit. But just hasn't grown. They were the same size and both planted 5 years ago. Okay, now can we all gather around a little bit? I mentioned flower buds. Here are your flower buds, guys. See these things right here?
That's
Those
the
are,
flower bud.
this is the axil of the leaf. In other words, where the leaf hits the stem, and that's the flower bud. Up here, above it, is a leaf bud, or stem bud. And so what will happen next year, this will produce a flower, and this will produce a stem. A leaf and a stem there, okay? And so you can see on this one, this one has three flower buds on this stem. Now these formed last June for next year. So anyone if you've got trees at home, go on, you know where they're going to flower or not, just go home and look. You can tell. And that's why when I sell trees, someone will ask me, well, will it flower next year? Or will I have fruit next year? Guaranteed no, because there are no flower buds on it. But maybe the year after, probably the year after. Now, we take this same example since we're here. I mentioned cyanwood. If I want to graft this, use this for grafting next year, I would come in and cut this right about here. Of course, there'd be no leaves on it. The flower buds would be on it, but you just take this, cut it in late February. Preferably, the book says at least you should have at least a day or two of above freezing temperatures for a couple of days before you take cyanwood. I've done it both ways, and I don't know that it really makes a whole lot of difference. But you don't want to do it in January when it's down to zero. But fluctuating, freezing, non-freezing is probably okay. Anyway, cut that off. Put it in a plastic bag and put it immediately in the refrigerator, and that's where it's stored, and that's what's used for grafting. If I was going to graft, let's say I cut it here. First of all, I wouldn't like this stem because I don't like to cut off with the flower buds. There's a vegetative bud in there, and if you just take that bud off, take the flower bud off, you can use that for grafting also. I prefer not to have the flower bud there. I think it's maybe just you get a little faster reaction. But you see, you got leaf buds up here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaf buds. So I can get like 5 grafts off of this one stem, if you want. If you want to do a graft with only 1 bud. I usually do 2. And when I do 2, I find that almost always both take. So I think it's probably, most of the time you only need 1. But in any case, so there you have it. And you see, if you look at there's flower buds here, there's flower buds here, there's flower buds here. I mean, this tree will have hundreds of flowers next year. This one's got, what, 4 on it. Ideal. Now here, this would be a good one for grafting because I can cut this here. See, there's no flower buds out here. I can take this here, and I've got good leaf or stem buds there. And that would work nicely. And this is even a better one. You got all this with no flower buds.
So are flies primarily your pollinate?
Flies primarily.
Do you do anything to attract the flies?
I put horse manure around the trees, and
manure.
I think the horse manure does help. We'll put that out. I've got it stacked right now, composting, and probably in February I'll be moving it around the trees. I think that helps. The books say you can hang rotting meat in the trees. I don't know about that. I've tried deer carcasses, leftover deer carcasses here. I don't know whether it helped or not. I think it just seems like some years there's more flies than others. This past year was excellent. I did hand pollinate some also. That's probably why this tree behind Tony here is had too many fruits on it. I hand pollinated. I was like, I got to make sure Shenandoah has fruit. Well, I ended up with 100 fruit on it. You know?
What did you do to
Yeah, to hand pollinate, usually in the spring, I hold a whole seminar on that here. But to hand pollinate very easily, you take a very tiny little artist brush, and you take pollen from when the pollen is ripe from one plant, one cultivar, and I actually scrape it off into I use a shot glass, which will just hold under the flower, scrape off pollen off of a bunch of them, let's say off of this tree. And then I'll go over to this tree over here and take my brush and dab. Look for the right females. Remember, those are the green flowers. Don't do it the other way around. You got to take it from take the pollen from the maroon flowers, the mature flowers, to the immature green flowers. And, it works pretty well.
Charlie, what is this one? The leaves are beautiful.
What tree is this? Oh, this is Rebecca's Gold. This is a really nice tree, and it's got nice fruit on it. About 90% of the fruit is gone already on this. About 4 or 5 days ago, this fruit just all of a sudden started ripening. I was literally carried, must have been 6 or 8 buckets of fruit in twice a day here for a day or two. Birds don't seem to bother, no. Once in a while I'll find one on the ground, a squirrel or a mouse or something's chewed on, but that's all. Raccoons are big on pawpaws, but I don't have any raccoons here. And same with groundhogs, they like them. Possums will eat them also. But other than that, that's the only thing that bothers the fruit. I have very little problem with squirrels and other animals. So,
How do you know they're ripe?
good question. How do you know the fruit is ripe? And I was looking before you people came to find one good example. Ideally, pawpaws should be hand-picked. Now this year, this past week, the fruit, everything ripened at once. I literally came out here and the ground was fruit all over the place, and I was picking it up 2 or 3 times a day, just for a day or two, and that's over. Now I'm looking for one that's kind of ripe, but how do you do it? You approach the fruit and you feel it. And these feel real hard. You can feel that if you like. Those are not ripe quite yet. But if you take, now this one just came off sometime in the last hour or two. Feel right where the fruit is attached to the tree. If you feel that, a little soft.
Oh,
A little soft.
it's dense.
Yeah, dense. But you can't do that to this one.
It is dry, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Nice
Yeah.
and soft.
And so normally, in a commercial orchard, where they don't want the fruit, especially if it's a high quality commercial orchard, like one down in Maryland that I'm familiar with,
That's the most.
the guy, he's got pickers there, and he and his wife, and they go around and literally feel the trees. They keep them, first of all, they keep them topped, excuse me, so that they can reach virtually everything. And they go around, and he said, of course, after a little while, you know which ones to feel. They start to look. Many of them, the color will start to change a little bit. You know it's just about ripe, and you can even smell them. Now these, another day or two, these will be ripe. You can see the colors changing on those, as compared to this one down here, a little more in the shade, and these will be a while longer, and they're really hard there.
If you pick them, is that right?
These probably would. This one might not, because they're a little harder.
So they can't ripen.
They can ripen a little bit, but if you pick them, say, a week or 2 or 3 before they're ripe, they'll sit on the shelf and they'll just kind of wrinkle, and they'll never internally ripen. They never get soft, and they don't. They don't taste. No, they taste lousy. Yeah. I see you've been to Ohio Pawpaw Festival.
No, this was given to me yesterday in Ohio because I missed it by a week.
Oh.
But I did have the beer.
Uh-huh.
And the beer is amazing.
Yes.
The beer is fantastic. So I hope you are successful in convincing the local brewers.
You know, there was on Route 22 in Greenbrook, westbound Greenbrook, this summer, I don't know, middle of summer, they had Pawpaw beer on tap for a short period of time. And I went in, and before I heard about it, by the time I got there, it was gone. And the bartender said, I don't know where they got it, and it's gone, and I don't think we have any more. But I've had it out at the festival, and I've had it out in Ohio.
I was in Columbus, and they
Uh-huh.
gave me this. And
Yeah, good,
it was
good,
great.
good. Okay, let's walk this way, please. You people that fruit that was taken off, if you want to pass that around a little bit, everybody can see what a ripe fruit is.
You put these bamboos up to keep the branches from breaking?
Yes. Yeah, see now these were, this was up like this, and this had probably 3 or 4 pounds of fruit on it. And this is indicative of not thinning the fruit, number one. Number two, not pruning the trees. So they're letting the trees get a little bit leggy and a little bit big. But it's okay. I get the fruit, and it's fine. If I had 100 or 1,000 trees, then I would have to do something different. But with this bunch of trees here in the yard, it works fine. This is mango. I think we'll probably sample this one. This is a kind of a famous one, older one. It's an heirloom. This is one called Pennsylvania Golden. And the tree looks like hell right now because it's had so much fruit on it. It's really stressed the tree. You can see the leaves. This is probably a Fastichia on these leaves, and it's the only tree that's really bothered. But there's just way too much fruit on it. It should have been thinned. It was not. But the tree will bounce back. The fruit will come off. The branches will spring back up. By next spring, it'll look just lovely. I want to show you this. See, look at this. What is this? Tell you what happened here. This is a tree that I actually bought from another nursery a number of years ago. And it was here for 2 or 3 years, and then it died. And you can see the stump. Here's the stump. But from the stump up came these shoots. So, in last May, I grafted them. Here's the graft, here. And I said, oh, I'll graft all 3. One of them will take maybe. Well, no, all 3 took. So now I have 3 trees growing here. This is Chappelle. This is Benson. And I don't know what the other one is, doesn't matter. It's down below. Well, that's one called Prima, which is an interesting one that actually is a variety that was developed in Europe from seeds sent over from the U.S., obviously. And they did their breeding experiments over there, and that's one they selected. But now, look at the amount of growth I got. And my point of this is, if any of you have wild seedlings or have seedlings, you can cut them. If you want to improve the cultivar you have, you can cut them off and graft onto them. And if you've got a rootstock that's a few years old, that will support a tremendous amount of growth, as you can see here. What happened here? Just that one, just the root. This is a root. Probably the roots in here are forming a 3-foot diameter circle. And so all that energy coming out of the roots, boom. Look here, I got trees that are that's 3-4 foot of growth on it. And there are 3 different varieties. I'll probably just let them grow together. Why not? And they'll certainly cross-pollinate there.
Do they transplant well if you wanted to move something?
Well, first of all, you couldn't transplant here because all 3 are connected to the same root system. I'll show you some others. Because one of the other characteristics of pawpaws is that they tend to put up a lot of root suckers, and you can graft onto the root suckers. Remember, a root sucker, you can have a grafted tree, for example, Shenandoah, but if it puts up a root sucker, it's a sucker from the rootstock, not Shenandoah, so you don't know what you've got. But if we come on this way, this was a root sucker that came up here 2 years ago, and I grafted onto it. And it's a little close. This is Allegheny. This is Peterson's Allegheny. This is a little close here. I'm probably going to try next spring to dig this tree, but root suckers are hard to dig. because you'll have a root coming out of this parent tree over to here, and it puts up a shoot. And then if you try to dig that up, it'll have almost no roots of its own. But it's been here long enough that we may try to move that one just for experimental purposes mostly. So that's one example. Here's another example of a root sucker that I grafted about 4 or 5 years ago. This is a root sucker. What's the date on it? 17. So 4 years ago, I grafted. This was a root sucker down here. I grafted onto it. I grafted Potomac on it. I don't know whether it's a root from this tree or the big tree here. Doesn't matter. And it took off and it produces fruit now. Now I've got it. It's really kind of almost too close in here, but it's okay. This is Potomac. It produces really nice big fruit, and we like it. No, oh no, we're back up. Yeah, I wanted to show you that, Mike. Thank you. It's close to a mulberry. It's related to mulberry. That's called Che. C-H-E. Oh yeah. Unfortunately, it's not ripe yet. And this one's got. It's in the mulberry family. It's actually grafted onto a Osage orange rootstock, and Osage orange is related to mulberry too.
Is it native to?
Che is not. It's Asian. Of course, the Osage orange is native here, and Osage orange, you may know it as hedge apple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Big fruit, about like this, green. They'll drop around the time the leaves drop, and they have lots of thorns, and it's actually a very good wood. If you get it dried out, it makes a great fireplace wood, and it's also tremendously rot resistant. But anyway, this is a relative of it. These will probably next weekend be ripe. When I was down at Michael Judd's pawpaw event 2 or 3 years ago, he has one of these, and that's the middle of in Maryland, and that's in the middle of September, and his was ripe there. And man, they were so tasty, and I said, I got to have one of these. So I actually got the graft wood from him, and did the grafting and planted it here. And I do sell them.
And it's called a Che?
Che, C-H-E. I forget the genus and species, but if you Google Che, you'll come up with all the information on it.
So that's from 2 to 3 years ago?
It's either the second or third year this has been in the ground. I think the third year this has been in the ground.
Is this the first year of fruit?
It had some fruit last year. Yes, not a lot, but it should be kind of pruned into a bush type of tree. But they will, if you prune it right, it'll grow upright. I haven't pruned it; it's just been growing here. Yeah, kind of interesting. And what's that? Wisely. So yeah, I'm just hoping that we get fruit here in another week or two. Yeah. Well, somewhat. Yeah, this is all comfrey in here. There's comfrey mostly. On some of these over here, we have something called fuki, which is a Japanese import that Michael Judd touts for understory. In fact, it's around this tree I was showing you over here. Those little ones are fuki. Those are small. That's been cut back at least 3 times this year. So they'll get like this big and big heads on them, and cut them back, they rot, come up again. Makes a good green manure under here. So that's fuki here. The same is true with comfrey. You can cut the comfrey back a few times a year. This is Bocking 14 sterile hybrid comfrey. I also have a couple other varieties of comfrey here that we grow. But as far as the rest of the understory, it's a lot of weeds, Mike.
You're all right with that? You let the wild stuff grow, chop it
I not enough hours in the day to keep it down.
I was going to ask.
The only problem I have with my wife complains constantly about all the weeds.
Because I wanted to ask whether, because this seems like a very kind of garden-like environment. Are you also growing the trees in like rows? And,
I do have in the field down here. If anybody wants to go down, we can take a look at those.
and is that something where you would let the comfrey grow? Or
Mostly down there I have just grass, but I try to keep the grass out from away from the trees. So it's just mulch around the trees. And yeah, I got rows of trees down there. That was just like, I set that out as an orchard. These are black currants here, which are actually supposed to be in New Jersey, I would think. My son planted them, so what can I tell you? What else? This is, I forget what this is. This is actually kind of a nice bush. It gets nice flowers and a fruit that you can make a drink with.
Which one?
This tree here.
What's it
These
called?
bushes, I can't remember. Tell you the truth. Here again, this is something Justin planted. My son came back from, he was got a master's degree in England at a small college, and then he stayed and worked at that college, and then adjacent to there was a pretty well-known environmentalist who has what he called a forest garden. Martin Crawford, some of you may have heard of Martin Crawford. He writes, he has books out, and in fact I've even thought of trying to get him to do a NOFA talk at some point. But anyway, Justin worked with Martin for a couple of years, and that's when he came back here. I'll tell you, that was 15 years ago. He came back from England, and what we're looking at now was nothing. Grass. It was grass. He said, Dad, what the hell are you doing mowing all this lawn? Let's plant some trees and start a forest garden. So we put down ground shield all the way around this area, and we covered it and tried to kill the weeds. You can't kill Jersey weeds, even though we left it for like a year before we started planting it here. But we got some stuff going pretty well, and it was also his idea to get peach trees and apple trees and plum trees, and my advice of this is all of us here in New Jersey should leave the European trees in Europe. They're disease ridden here. Like I said, that one peach tree, I've never gotten a peach off of it. I got one other peach over here. I got maybe half a dozen this year. And they were nice sized, late peach. But I had to pick them. If you left them to ripen on the tree, they rotted internally, just rot. Take them indoors, I'll take them indoors, they still rotted before they ripened indoors. So I cut out a few pieces of them. That was it. The only other fruit that Asian pears and regular pears do pretty well here. And we've got a bunch of those planted around because in this area we have a lot on the farm and in adjacent areas wild calorie pears growing. I can show you in fact I'll be glad to show you those. The calorie pear is an ornamental pear that's the landscapers planted. In fact, they're still planting. But the problem is they were supposed to be sterile, and of course they weren't all sterile. And so they seed like crazy. And so the back part of our farm here is just kind of grown up with a lot of them. Justin went through and grafted regular pears onto them, probably about 50 of them. So we got pears scattered around everywhere. But I got a couple right over here. I can show you what he did with them. And so we do get decent pears. In fact, we've had I got one pear tree here about every third year. It loads up. I must have had, I would say at least 30 bushels. I'm sorry, bushels. 5-gallon buckets, not 30 buckets, 30 gallons, maybe 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets of pears off of this one tree. That sounds better, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them were rotten, but it's an early soft pear, so if you don't get them, they hit the ground 2 days later, they're bad. But we dried them, we canned them, we made, Catherine's made 3 or 4 desserts with them, and we've given them away up until this week. I've had buckets of them out here, and anybody who came by to buy any, here, help yourself, take some pears. But they're gone, sorry folks. Now if we come just down this way, we'll kind of head in and see if we can wrap this up in a little bit. I do have figs out. Most of all my figs are in pots, but I take those in around Thanksgiving and then we're good. To this side, and people can be on that side. This is the main nursery area. A month ago, this was all pawpaws in here, grafted trees, but people picked up most of them. I've still got about maybe 10 extra trees here. The trees that are in this bunch, these are premium trees. These are mine, and Alex gets some of these, and that's it. I'm going to plant the rest of them out here myself. These are mulberries, cuttings growing here. These are not. Now, this is one of the, this is one of the wild calories here and here. See all the thorns on them? Look at this, a terrible tree. One nice thing about it though, out in the woods, the deer will never rub them. So you can graft on them, and this is a graft. Right here. It was done about 12, 13 years ago. And the tree right behind us here, this is the one that had the 30 or 40 bushel, gallons of pears on it. And they're all gone now. You can't kill them all. Okay. Okay, any questions down here? System or put it in the ground and it's not worth it.
Where are your persimmons?
Persimmons that I have are in the front yard. And one other stop on our way out. That one there, that's a Shenandoah there. What's that? Yeah, I don't think they're ripe yet. Anyway, one other thing I want to point out. We mentioned before disease. Well, Japanese beetles, I don't know whether you call it a disease or not, but it's a pest. And this apple tree, this is a Liberty apple. And look at what it did to the leaves. And of course, most of the leaves are gone. Japanese beetle. Look at the pawpaw right next to it. No damage. That's just one example.
This one too?
What's that?
This one, what happened here?
On this?
Yeah.
This is a disease on the peach. This is something else.
Oh, this is a peach.
This peach tree's got to go. But anyway, yeah. You look at this is the most damage you get from Japanese beetle. And we had a lot of Japanese beetle this year. just a little bit on the leaves. Very little bit, which doesn't really affect the plant to any extent. Whereas the tree behind you would totally eat up that apple tree. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, when you get to eat them.
What's that?
When you get to eat these.
Oh, we're going to eat them right now. Yeah.
I want to put them out to your ear
That's
because
good.
the bugs will be all over.
Okay. Yeah, you might grab a couple. If you will, please. Okay. Time to do our tasting.
Can I break this one up to show everybody what it looks like when it opens up?
Well, you got them broke up already.
It's toothpicks.
Toothpicks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Here's the procedure. You take a toothpick and a plate. There's napkins here. And that doesn't go in there.
Well, I put those so they could take, oh, you're doing it.
Yeah, use toothpicks.
Okay.
Okay? Now this is Wabash. You can tell Wabash. Is that it? Oh, one more? Two more?
Different kind.
I couldn't find ones for Benson. I can only find one Rebecca Gold.
What else is new? After 50 years, you still can't read my. Okay, you can gather around. And
Do you eat the skin? Yeah.
oh yeah, I forgot to say, don't eat the skin, although it won't hurt you. But don't eat the skin. Don't eat the seeds, and they won't hurt you either. But there's no reason to eat them.
How do you put them up? Do you freeze or?
If I want to pulp them, I just take the skin out and the seeds out and freeze the pulp. Yeah. Okay. I don't know what that is. Now, we have enough of all. What do you need? Another Rebecca's Gold? Is that what you want, Catherine?
Banana bread? Yeah, like banana bread or zucchini bread.
So same kind of,
Same kind of recipe, pretty much. Like zucchini
Rebecca's Gold.
pawpaw instead of zucchini.
Was that the only one? Was there another one, Catherine, or was that it?
I couldn't read your writing. I couldn't find one.
Which? Yeah, cut that one. It tastes like them all. Yeah. Cluster. But there was a study done where they showed. Yeah, if you.
And then those ones that you grafted, those three that were grafted, was that just like what you said, just like an inch of science?
Yeah, one bud, one or two buds. Boom! It's little men. Did you have any others?
I haven't, but
Well, that's got a little different taste. Can I help you?
This is fun.
What's that? You never
These are the trees that we have.
had a sample of that out or not?
No, well,
Atwood you have out. Shenandoah, but once ahead of time. We
Right.
can't just start brewing your stuff tomorrow.
Right.
So